A 5-year-old boy, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and holding a drawing in his hands, walked into the imposing office of the most powerful millionaire in the country and said with the utmost naturalness, "I'm here for the interview. No one there." Knew, but that phrase was going to change everything. Richard Mitchell adjusted his Italian tie and checked his Rolex once more. It was exactly 2:47 p.m., and he'd already wasted his entire day interviewing mediocre candidates for the executive assistant position. From the 47th floor of the most imposing building in New York City, he observed the city through the windows of his office while waiting for the next candidate. "Excuse me, Mr. Mitchell." Melissa, his current assistant, opened the door slightly with a peculiar expression on her face. There was something different in her tone of voice, a mixture of nervousness and contained amusement. "The next candidate is, here." Richard frowned, intrigued by Melissa's hesitation. She never stuttered. In 5 years as his assistant, she had always been the personification of efficiency. Before he could question her, the door opened completely. A small human being, no taller than 4 feet, entered the room. Wearing a clearly borrowed suit, several sizes too large, and a crooked bow tie, the boy carried a briefcase that seemed to have been made for an adult. With determined steps, he approached Richard's desk. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm here for the interview." The childish voice sounded firm, contrasting with his chubby cheeks and hair carefully combed to the side. Richard blinked several times, making sure he wasn't having a hallucination caused by overwork. He looked at Melissa, who remained at the door, biting her lip to contain a smile. "How old are you?" It was the only question he could formulate. 5 years, 7 months, and... The boy looked at a colorful plastic watch on his wrist. 16. "Taze, but don't worry, I already know how to tie my shoes by myself." Richard felt something strange happen to his face. He was smiling. Not the calculated smile he reserved for board meetings or important negotiations, but a genuine smile, one of those he had forgotten he was capable of giving. "And what's your name, young candidate?" "Michael." The boy placed his briefcase on the desk with difficulty. "I brought my resume." From inside the briefcase, which Richard now realized was an old school folder, Michael pulled out some notebook pages scribbled with childish handwriting and colorful drawings on the edges. "I see you have experience." Richard took the pages, pretending to analyze them seriously. "In lemonade sales?" "Yes, sir." Michael's eyes sparkled. "I made $23 in 1 day, and I only needed my mom's help to make change." The mention of his mother brought an almost imperceptible shadow to the boy's eyes. Richard, an expert at reading people during negotiations, didn't miss this detail. "And why do you want this job, Michael?" The boy straightened up in the chair, which was so tall that his feet dangled without touching the floor. "My mom works a lot, you know. She comes home very tired. Sometimes she even falls asleep while she's telling me a story. If I can get a job, I can help her rest more." Richard felt something tighten in his chest. It was a long-forgotten sensation, buried under years of meetings, spreadsheets, and goals. As he observed that small human being in a suit too big for him, speaking with such sincerity about wanting to help his mother, he realized that something important was happening there. "And when are you available to start?" he asked, maintaining a professional tone, even though his heart was melting with every word from the boy. "I can start after cartoons," Michael promptly responded. "But on Wednesdays, only after soccer, and I need days off for ice cream with my mom because it's tradition." Melissa, still at the door, couldn't contain a laugh. She quickly disguised it with a cough and left the room, but not before discreetly pointing her cell phone at the scene. Richard was so absorbed in the conversation that he didn't even notice the soft flash of the camera. "I have one more important question." Richard leaned over the desk. "What do you know about the stock market?" "Oh, that's easy," Michael smiled, revealing a gap where a baby tooth was missing. "I learned everything on YouTube. When the arrows are green, it's good. When they're red, it's bad. Just like traffic lights." Richard couldn't contain a hearty laugh. For the first time in years, a job interview had truly surprised him. There he was, one of the most feared executives in the financial market, talking about economic indicators with a child who still watched cartoons. Melissa couldn't resist. That scene was too precious not to be recorded. With nimble fingers, she quickly edited the video she had captured and shared it in a private WhatsApp group, just with a few close colleagues. "You won't believe what's happening in the boss's office," she wrote in the caption. In a matter of minutes, the video began its viral journey. From group to group, from network to network, the image of powerful Richard Mitchell interviewing a 5-year-old boy in an oversized suit spread like wildfire. People couldn't resist the contrast between the executive's seriousness and the unpretentious sweetness of the little candidate. Meanwhile, oblivious to the digital hurricane forming, Richard continued his peculiar interview. "And how much do you expect to earn, Michael?" The boy scratched his chin thoughtfully. "How much does an hour of sleep cost? Because that's what I want to buy for my mum." The answer hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. In 20 years of corporate career, he had never heard something so sincere and profound in a job interview. There was a 5-year-old child teaching him about purpose and values without even knowing the meaning of those words. "You know, Michael, I think we can negotiate something." Richard picked up a post-it and started making notes. "How about—" The door opened abruptly. A woman entered breathless, her hair slightly disheveled and her face flushed from running. "Michael, my God, I finally found you." Richard looked up from the post-it and felt the world stop. There, standing at his door, was Catherine, the same Catherine who had returned his engagement ring 6 years ago, saying she couldn't compete with his obsession with work. The same Catherine who had disappeared from his life without a trace. The same Catherine who now looked at the boy with a mixture of relief and concern. "Mommy." Michael smiled, apparently oblivious to the tension that had settled in the room. "Look, I was doing a job interview, just like you said you were going to do next week." Richard's blood froze. His brain, trained to process information quickly, began to do the math. Catherine, Michael, 5 years, the perfect timing for— "Richard," Catherine whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I can explain." The executive felt his throat go dry. Words seemed to have fled from his extensive vocabulary. His eyes alternated between Catherine and Michael, noticing for the first time the similarities. The same eye shape, the same delicate nose, but the chin was just like his. "Mommy, do you know my future boss?" Michael asked innocently, breaking the heavy silence that had settled. Catherine approached and took her son's hand. "Michael, sweetheart, we need to go now." "But my interview," the boy protested, grabbing his improvised resume. "Catherine, wait." Richard finally found his voice. "We need to talk." "No, Richard, we don't," she responded firmly, but her eyes betrayed her agitation. "Michael, let's go." "Mr. Richard." Michael turned one last time, formal even amid the chaos. "Sorry, but I think I'll have to postpone starting my job. My mom has that face she gets when I eat cookies in secret." In any other moment, the observation would have been comical, but Richard barely registered it. His world had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. As he watched Catherine practically drag Michael out of his office, a notification on his cell phone caught his attention. It was a message from his communications director. "Mr. Mitchell, we have a situation. A video of your interview with a child is going viral. It already has more than 100,000 views and is growing exponentially. We need an official position from the company." Richard collapsed into his Italian leather chair. In less than an hour, his organized and controlled life had transformed into true chaos. A chaos that wore a suit 3 sizes too big and had his chin. Richard's office transformed into a virtual battlefield in the hours that followed. His cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emails appeared every second. And social media exploded with memes and comments about the mini CEO, as Michael was already being called on the internet. But Richard couldn't focus on any of this. His mind was fixed on a single reality he had just discovered. He had a son he didn't know, whom he didn't see grow up, who didn't know of his existence until he appeared in his office with a resume written in pencil. "Melissa," he called through the intercom. "I need Catherine's address. Now." "Sir, Melissa responded hesitantly. "The press office is on the line. They need a statement about the video." "The video can wait, the address can't." After a few minutes of searching, Melissa got the information. Catherine worked as a manager at a children's book publisher in Brooklyn. Richard grabbed his keys and hurriedly left the office, ignoring the curious looks from his employees. On the way to the publisher, memories he had buried began to emerge. His last conversation with Catherine 6 years ago echoed in his mind. "You can't see beyond these glass walls, Richard. There's a world out there. There's life beyond spreadsheets and meetings. But you've chosen not to see it." She was pregnant at that time. Pregnant and alone, facing a workaholic ex-fiancé who couldn't set aside 5 minutes of his day for a romantic dinner. Guilt consumed him now, biting his conscience with sharp teeth. Arriving at the publisher, he found Catherine in her office, frantically organizing papers. She raised her eyes when he entered, not seeming surprised by his presence. "Where is he?" Richard asked, his voice softer than he intended. "At music class. Tuesdays are guitar days," Catherine responded, setting the papers aside. "How did you find us?" "I have my resources." He approached her desk. "Why, Catherine? Why did you never tell me?" She let out a tired sigh, running her hand through her hair. "What did you want me to say, Richard? Hey, remember when you cancelled our engagement dinner to close that merger? Well, I'm pregnant. You barely had time for our relationship. How would you have time for a child?" Her words hit him like accurate arrows. "I had the right to know, to choose." "Choose?" Catherine laughed humorlessly. "You had already made your choice. Your company always came first. Always. I couldn't subject a child to that." Richard sat in the chair in front of her desk, feeling the weight of 5 years of involuntary absence. "He's amazing, Catherine, so smart, so pure." Her face softened for a moment. "Yes, he is. Michael is the best part of my life. Every day he surprises me with something new. Today, for example, he decided he needed a job to help me rest more." She shook her head, a reluctant smile appearing. "Imagine my panic when I discovered he had run away from school and ended up precisely in your office." "How did he find out about the job opening?" "He heard me commenting on the phone about a job interview I would have next week. Apparently he decided to get ahead of me and do his first." Catherine picked up her cell phone. "And now it's everywhere. Have you seen the video?" Richard nodded. "It's going viral. My communications team is going crazy." "What are we going to do?" she asked for the first time, letting her concern show through. "First, we need to talk to him. Explain everything." Richard hesitated. "He doesn't know about me, does he?" Catherine shook her head. "He knows he has a father, but he never asked much, I think. I think Edward fills that space a bit." "Edward?" "My co-worker. He has been very present in Michael's life for the last 2 years. They have a special connection." Richard felt a twinge of jealousy. Another man was building memories with his son, while he didn't even know of the boy's existence. But he had no right to complain, did he? "We need to think about Michael now," Catherine continued. "How are we going to tell him? How will he react? And there's also all this exposure on the internet." At that moment, Richard's cell phone rang again. It was his press office. The video had surpassed 1 million views, and major news outlets were already trying to make contact. The story of the powerful CEO and the little job candidate was about to gain a new and unexpected chapter. The guitar class ended at 5:30 p.m. Catherine and Richard waited in her car, parked in front of the music school, each lost in their own thoughts. The silence between them was dense, loaded with unspoken words and years of distance. "He likes chocolate ice cream with sprinkles," Catherine broke the silence. "When he's nervous, he scratches his nose with his index finger, just like you." Richard swallowed hard. They were simple, everyday details, but each piece of information about Michael was like a precious treasure that he tried to eagerly store away. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" Catherine asked, her voice betraying her apprehension. Before Richard could respond, they saw Michael leaving the building carrying his small folder of sheet music and a guitar that seemed huge for his size. He smiled when he saw his mother's car, but his smile faltered when he noticed Richard in the passenger seat. "Mr. Richard?" Michael asked, confused after getting into the car. "Did you come to give me the job?" Catherine took a deep breath. "Michael, sweetheart, we need to talk. How about getting some ice cream?" The boy's eyes lit up at the mention of the sweet, but there was a shadow of concern on his face. Even at just 5 years old, he seemed to feel the weight of the moment. At the ice cream parlor, seated at a table away from others, Michael licked his chocolate cone with sprinkles while observing the adults with curiosity. His improvised suit had been replaced by his school uniform, but he maintained the same serious posture from the interview. "Michael," Catherine began softly, "remember when you asked me about your father?" The boy nodded, stopping licking his ice cream. "You said he was far away, working." Richard felt his heart tighten. Catherine gave him a significant look. It was his cue. "Michael," Richard leaned over the table, trying to keep his voice steady. I am your father." The ice cream dripped down Michael's hand, who remained motionless, wide eyes fixed on Richard. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. "No," Michael finally spoke, his voice small. "You can't be." "It's true, son," Catherine confirmed gently. "But—" Michael looked at his mother, then at Richard, his eyes beginning to well up. "But why did you never come to see me? Why did you never come to my guitar performances? Why did you never pick me up from school like Uncle Edward does?" Each question was like a stab in Richard's chest. How to explain 5 years of absence to a 5-year-old child? "I didn't know," Richard tried to explain. "I didn't know you existed, Michael. If I had known—" "Everyone knew," Michael interrupted, his voice rising. "The teacher knew. Uncle Edward knew. Even the doorman of the building knew. Only you didn't know." The melted ice cream dripped onto the table, forgotten. Tears began to stream down the boy's face. "I thought," Michael sobbed, "I thought you didn't want to see me. That I had done something wrong." Catherine immediately wrapped her son in a hug. "No, my love, you never did anything wrong. It was me who didn't tell your father about you. I thought I was doing what was best." Richard observed the scene, feeling like an intruder. He wanted to hug his son, console him, but he didn't know if he had that right. 5 years of lost moments separated him from Michael. "Is that why you work so much, Mommy?" Michael asked between sobs. "Because you have to work for two?" The innocent question hit both Catherine and Richard. This was why Michael had gone for the job interview, not just to help his mother rest, but to fill a void that he didn't even know how to explain. "Michael," Richard finally found the courage to approach, "I know I can't recover the lost time, but if you give me a chance, I promise I'll try to make up for every minute." The boy raised his teary eyes. "Do you really promise? Pinky swear." Richard extended his pinky finger, doing something he never imagined he would do in public. "I promise. And pinky promises are the most important of all, aren't they?" Michael hesitated for a moment before intertwining his small finger with Richard's. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning, a first step on a long path of reconnection. "But there's still one very important thing," Michael said, wiping away tears with his shirt sleeve. "Did I get the job or not?" The news of Richard Mitchell's paternity exploded on social media the next morning. The mini CEO video gained a new dimension when the press discovered that the little candidate was, in fact, the powerful executive's son. Headlines ranged from sensational to touching, but all highlighted the unlikely meeting between father and son. Richard observed the repercussions from his office, now with different eyes. The glass walls, which previously represented his power and success, seemed cold and distant. On his desk next to the latest model laptop was Michael's improvised resume, carefully stored in a folder. "Mr. Mitchell?" Melissa entered the room with a worried expression. "The board is requesting an emergency meeting. They are restless with all this exposure." "Schedule it for tomorrow," Richard replied, checking his cell phone. "Today I have a more important commitment." The commitment in question was picking up Michael from school. Catherine had agreed, after much insistence, to allow Richard to start participating in their son's routine. It was a delicate first step, full of expectations and fears on both sides. At 3:30 p.m., Richard parked his BMW in front of the school. He felt strangely nervous, as if he were about to close the biggest deal of his life. In a way, he was. "Daddy!" Michael's voice sounded across the schoolyard, making Richard freeze. It was the first time he heard that word directed at him. The boy was running towards him, backpack bouncing on his back, a broad smile on his face. "You really came?" "Of course I came," Richard replied, bending down to be at his son's height. "I promised, didn't I?" "With your pinky," Michael solemnly confirmed. "Where are we going?" Richard had planned to take him to an expensive toy store. Buy anything the boy wanted. It was his usual way of solving things, with money. But something in Michael's pure gaze made him change his mind. "How about a walk in the park? We can get ice cream afterward." "Like yesterday?" Michael asked, his voice lowering a little. "No, today will be different," Richard assured, understanding the reference to the difficult moment of the revelation. "Today we'll just have fun, and you can tell me all about your guitar lessons." At the park, Richard discovered a completely new world. Michael taught him to make paper airplanes using sheets from his meeting notebook, explained the complex rules of an imaginary game involving superheroes and dinosaurs, and demonstrated his skill at climbing trees, something that made the executive's heart nearly stop several times. "Did you know I learned to climb trees with Uncle Edward?" Michael commented casually, while savoring his chocolate ice cream with sprinkles. Richard felt that familiar twinge of jealousy, but he struggled to keep his voice neutral. "Really? And what else do you do with Uncle Edward?" "Oh, lots of things. He taught me to ride a bike, takes me to the amusement park, sometimes comes to my guitar performances." Michael paused, looking at Richard with curiosity. "Will you come to my next performance?" "When is it?" "Next week. I'm going to play Home on the Range. Uncle Edward helped me practice." Richard took a deep breath, fighting against the growing irritation with each mention of Edward's name. "I'll be there, Michael. I promise." "Pinky swear?" "Pinky swear." Richard smiled, extending his pinky finger. It was amazing how this simple gesture had already become so significant between them. At the end of the afternoon, when Richard dropped Michael off at home, Catherine was waiting for them at the door. Her gaze alternated between concern and relief at seeing the smile on her son's face. "It was the best day," Michael exclaimed, hugging his mother. "Daddy taught me to make airplanes with super important meeting paper." Catherine raised an eyebrow at Richard, who shrugged, smiling. They were just quarterly reports. "And next week he's coming to my guitar recital," Michael continued, excited. "Right, Dad?" "Without fail," Richard confirmed, noticing Catherine's tense expression. "What time is the performance?" "At 2 p.m., Catherine replied. "But Richard, are you sure? I know how complicated your schedule is." "Nothing is more important than this," he stated with conviction. In his mind, he was already rearranging meetings and cancelling appointments. Michael's guitar recital would be his top priority. What Richard didn't know was that the corporate universe he had prioritized for so long was about to exact its price, precisely when he least expected it. The week that followed was a real test for Richard. During the day, he balanced between board meetings, which questioned his new public exposure, and attempts to keep his promise to be more present in Michael's life. At night, he spent hours awake, thinking about how he had missed 5 precious years of his son's life. The mini CEO story continued to reverberate, but now with a new angle. Blogs and specialized websites began to question the company's labor practices. The viral video had exposed not only Richard's human side, but also opened a discussion about the corporate environment he had created. "Mr. Mitchell," Melissa entered his office on the morning of Michael's performance, her face tense. "We've just received a notification. Business Magazine is going to publish a story about allegations of abusive practices in the company. Former employees, they're talking." Richard felt his stomach sink. He knew exactly what it was about. Years of excessive demands, unpaid overtime, psychological pressure, all in the name of results. When will it be published? Today in the afternoon, around 1 p.m. Richard looked at the clock. 11:47 a.m. Michael's performance was at 2 p.m. Enough. Time to deal with the crisis and still make it to the music school. Or so he thought. Call an emergency meeting with the directors and legal team. Now. The conference room filled up quickly. Nervous executives discussed damage control strategies, while the legal team presented increasingly concerning scenarios. Time passed inexorably. Because PM, the article was published. Richard's cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. 45 p.m. The crisis worsened. Important shareholders began to express their concern. PM, Catherine sent a message. Michael is anxious to see you. He practiced the song one more time just for you. 5 p.m. Richard was still trapped in the meeting room, his heart torn between his responsibilities as CEO and his promise as a father. p.m. Another message from Catherine. A photo of Michael on stage, holding his small guitar, anxiously, looking at the audience. 30 p.m. The performance had ended. Richard still hadn't managed to leave the office. When he finally arrived at the music school, at 3 p.m., he found only Catherine putting Michael's guitar in the car. The boy was nowhere to be seen. Where is he? Richard asked, his tone of voice betraying his desperation. He went home with Edward, Catherine replied, her voice cold. He needed someone to console him after his father didn't show up. Again. Mum? Word again hit Richard like a slap. It wasn't the first time he had disappointed someone he loved because of work. It was exactly what he had done to Catherine years. Catherine, I can explain. There was a crisis at the company. There's always a crisis, Richard. There's always something more important. She closed the trunk forcefully. Do you know what Michael said to me when you didn't arrive? But he promised with his pinky mommy, as if that meant something special. And it does, Richard protested. I wanted to be here, I swear I wanted to. But you weren't. Just like you haven't been for the last 5 years. Catherine sighed, tired. Do you have any idea what it means for a 5-year-old child to be left waiting? He kept looking at the door every time someone entered, until no one else came in. Richard felt the weight of his choices like never before. The crisis at the company now seemed insignificant compared to the look of disappointment he imagined in his son's eyes. I need to see him. I need to explain. Not today, Richard. He's too hurt. Catherine got into the car. You know what song he played? Home on the Range. He said he chose it because it talks about a place where you feel at home. Ironic, isn't it? As he watched Catherine's car drive away, Richard realized he was at a crossroads. The company he had built with so much commitment was in crisis, but his son, whom he had just begun to know, was already learning the first and most painful lesson about his father, that promises, even pinky ones, are sometimes broken. 3. Days passed since the guitar recital. Richard couldn't speak with Michael, who refused to take his calls. The voice messages he sent were answered with the painful silence of a hurt child. In his office, the glass walls now seemed like a transparent prison, reflecting the image of a man he no longer recognized. The crisis at the company worsened. More allegations emerged, and the mini-CEO story had transformed into an involuntary symbol of the discussion about balance between work and family in the corporate environment. Social media, which previously celebrated the touching meeting between father and son, now questioned how a man who couldn't be present at his own son's recital could lead a humanized company. Mr. Mitchell, Melissa entered his office with a concerned expression. The financial director is urgently requesting your presence. The company's shares have fallen 12% since the article was published. Richard stared fixedly at a photo on his cell phone, Michael smiling, holding his small guitar on the day they met. Cancel all my appointments for this afternoon. But sir, the shareholders' meeting say... I said all, Richard interrupted, getting up. I have something more important to resolve. Half an hour later, he was standing in front of Michael's school. The bell rang and the children began to exit. His heart accelerated when he saw his son, but the expression on the boy's face upon seeing him was a mixture of hurt and distrust. Michael, he called softly. The boy stopped, tightening the straps of his backpack. You broke the pinky promise. I know, Richard responded, kneeling to be at his son's height, "and I came to apologize." "Uncle Edward never breaks his promises," Michael said, the words coming out like small arrows aimed at Richard's heart. "I'm not Uncle Edward," Richard admitted. "I'm your father, and fathers make mistakes, sometimes big mistakes." "Like not going to see your son play guitar?" "Yes, like that. And like not being present for the last 5 years." Richard took a deep breath. "But do you know what the difference is between a mistake and a choice?" Michael shook his head negatively. "A mistake is something we do without meaning to and try to fix. A choice is something we decide to do even knowing it might hurt someone." Richard took something from his pocket. It was a golden button from his most expensive suit. "I've made many mistakes, Michael, but being here now is a choice. And I want you to have this as proof." "A button?" Michael asked, confused. "It's not just a button, it's a different kind of promise. Each time you look at it, you'll know that I chose to be your father above anything else. Even if sometimes I make mistakes, even if sometimes I lose my way, that choice will never change." Michael took the button, turning it between his fingers. "But what if you have another important meeting?" "Then I'll take you with me," Richard smiled. "It's about time the mini CEO really gets to know the company, don't you think?" A small smile began to form on Michael's face. "Can I bring my resume?" "Of course. And this time we'll do a real interview, complete with a tour of the office and everything. And ice cream afterward? With lots of sprinkles." Michael finally approached, carefully putting the button in his pocket. "Dad, can you teach me how to make a bow tie? Mine always comes out crooked." Richard felt his eyes well up. It was a simple request, but loaded with meaning. "I can teach you anything you want, son. Anything." On the way to the ice cream parlor, Michael told about his day at school, about how he had learned a new song on the guitar, and how he was practicing for the next performance. Richard listened to every word with attention, storing every detail, every expression, every smile. His cell phone rang insistently in his pocket, but for the first time in his life, Richard Mitchell, the powerful CEO, chose not to answer. Because some things, as he discovered, are more valuable than any business. Like the smile of a 5-year-old boy covered in chocolate ice cream. The next morning, the office of Mitchell Enterprises was different. Employees noticed the change as soon as they arrived. The blinds on the glass walls, which always remained open so Richard could monitor everything, were closed. Inside the CEO's office, an even more significant transformation was taking place. Richard was organizing his desk, separating documents into 2 piles, urgent and can wait. At his side, wearing a small, perfectly fitted suit and an immaculate bow tie, Michael observed him with curiosity. "Why are you putting that paper in the can wait pile?" asked the boy, pointing to an important contract. "Because I learned that not everything that seems urgent is really important," Richard responded, affectionately messing up his son's hair. The news that the CEO had brought his son to work spread quickly through the corridors. Employees passed by the office, trying to disguise their curiosity at seeing little Michael sitting in an adapted swivel chair next to his father's desk. "Mr. Mitchell," Melissa entered the room, carrying a stack of documents. "The board is waiting for the 9 a.m. meeting." "Great," Richard smiled. "Michael, ready for your first real meeting?" The boy's eyes sparkled. "Can I bring my resume?" "Of course, and today you're going to be my special assistant." The conference room fell silent when Richard entered with Michael. The executives exchanged confused looks, but no one dared to question the boy's presence. "Gentlemen," Richard began, "before we start, I'd like to introduce my junior executive assistant. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?" The boy stood up, adjusted his bow tie, and with the seriousness that only a 5-year-old can have, announced, "Good morning. I know that green arrows are good and red ones are bad, and I promise not to tell anyone the company's secrets, except my mom, because lying to her is wrong." Some discreet laughter echoed through the room, breaking the tension. Richard then began his presentation, but not about numbers or financial projections. For the first time in his career, he talked about people. "Our company is sick," he declared. "Not in the numbers, but in the soul. We need changes. and sometimes we need a child to show us the obvious. Michael, who was quietly drawing in his notepad, raised his eyes upon hearing his father speak. Richard continued, "Starting today, we will implement new policies, flexible hours for fathers and mothers, on-site daycare, quality of life program, and most importantly, a culture change." The directors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. One of them, Thomas Wright, the financial director, couldn't contain his indignation. "This is absurd. We'll lose competitiveness. The shareholders will understand," Richard interrupted, "that a company isn't just made of numbers. It's made of people, of families, of dreams." "Like my lemonade stand," Michael suddenly exclaimed. "I sold more when I let people smile." The innocent comment provoked more laughter, but Richard realized the profound wisdom in his son's words. "Exactly, Michael. Sometimes the best business strategy is simply to be human." The meeting continued, with proposals being discussed and plans being mapped out. Michael occasionally contributed with surprisingly insightful observations for his age, such as when he suggested that really long meetings make people look sleepy, like Mommy when she reads reports late at night. At the end of the day, as father and son packed up to leave, Melissa entered the office with a discreet smile. "Mr. Mitchell, the video of today's meeting. Well, someone shared some clips on social media." "Again?" Richard sighed. "Yes, but this time it's different. People are praising. The hashtag #MiniCEO changed my boss is trending." Michael, who was putting his drawings in his folder, asked, "Is that good, Dad?" "Is it a green arrow?" Richard laughed, picking up his son. "Yes, son. It's the most important green arrow of all." Catherine watched from the window of the publisher as the rain fell gently on New York. On her desk, children's book manuscripts accumulated, but her mind was far away. The last few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster since Michael had found Richard. "Are you okay?" Edward's voice brought her back to reality. He was standing at the door of her office, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I am," she replied, accepting the cup he offered. "Just thinking." "About Richard?" Edward asked, sitting in the chair in front of her desk. Catherine nodded. It was impossible not to think about her ex-fiancé now that he had become a constant presence in Michael's life. The changes were visible. Her son was happier, more confident, always full of stories about adventures with his father. "Michael can't stop talking about the day he spent at the office," she commented, blowing on the hot coffee. "Apparently, he's now a junior executive assistant." Edward smiled, but there was a shadow of concern in his eyes. "And how are you handling it?" "Honestly, I don't know." Catherine ran her hand through her hair. "On one hand, I'm happy to see Michael so excited. On the other, I'm afraid, Richard has always been unpredictable when it comes to commitments." "But he seems to be changing," Edward observed, his voice neutral. "I saw the news about the changes in his company." "Yes, he's changing, and that scares me even more." Catherine stood up, walking to the window again. "Because now it's not just Michael who's beginning to see a different side of him. I am too." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken meanings. Edward and Catherine had grown closer over the last 2 years, developing a friendship that many thought would evolve into something more. He had been a safe harbor for her and an important male figure for Michael. "Catherine," Edward began, his voice soft, "you know I'll always be here, don't you? Regardless of what happens." Before she could answer, her cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Richard. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Half an hour later, Catherine met Richard at the cafe near the publisher. He seemed different from the polished executive she had known years ago. There was a new softness in his eyes, a vulnerability she had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said, pulling out the chair for her. "What is it? Did something happen to Michael?" "No, he's fine. Actually," Richard hesitated, pulling an envelope from his suit. "It's about this." Catherine opened the envelope and found legal papers. Her heart raced, fearing the worst, a custody battle. But as she read the document, her eyebrows rose in surprise. "You're offering me a partnership in the company?" "It's not just a partnership," Richard explained. "I want you to take over as Human Resources Director. No one better than you to implement the changes we're making." Catherine shook her head, incredulous. "This is crazy. I work with children's books, not corporations." "Exactly why. You understand what's really important. You raised our son alone, built a respectable career, and never lost your humanity. The company needs that. I need that." Catherine studied her ex-fiancé's face, looking for signs of the old Richard, the manipulator, the controller, but she found only sincerity. "And what happens if I accept?" "We work together as if nothing had happened." "No," he answered. "We work together knowing exactly what happened, with mutual respect and a common goal, to create an environment where no other child needs to do a job interview to get their father's attention." The words hit Catherine directly. It was a professional proposal, but it was also more than that. It was a chance for reconstruction, to create something new from the mistakes of the past. "I need to think," she finally said. "It's not a simple decision. I know, and this time I promise to respect your time." Richard stood up, but before leaving he added, "Oh, and there's one more thing. Michael asked me to give you this." He placed a small golden object on the table, a suit button. Catherine picked it up, confused. "It's the family's new promise currency," Richard explained with a soft smile. "Apparently it's worth more than pinky promises." After he left, Catherine remained there, turning the button between her fingers, thinking about how life took curious turns. Edward was waiting for her at the publisher, with his coffee and his constant presence. Richard was offering a new chance, with his changes and promises shining like golden buttons. And in the midst of it all, there was Michael, the little CEO who, without knowing it, was rewriting the story of all of them. The news of Catherine's possible move to Richard's company spread quickly through the publisher. Edward was the first to notice the subtle changes in her behavior, the distant look during meetings, the discreet research on corporate management on her computer, the frequent calls with her lawyer. At home, Michael sensed that something was different. During dinner, he observed his mother with his perceptive 5-year-old eyes, noticing how she always seemed to be thinking about something distant. "Mommy," he asked one night, as Catherine was arranging his backpack for the next day, "are you going to work with Daddy?" Catherine stopped what she was doing, surprised by the direct question. "How do you know that?" "Daddy told me he gave you a button just like mine." Michael pulled his own golden button from his pajama pocket. "He said buttons are for special people who make important promises." Catherine sat on the bed beside her son, pulling him into a hug. "And what do you think about that? About me maybe working with your father?" Michael was silent for a moment, playing with the button. "Will Uncle Edward be sad?" The innocent question hit Catherine like lightning. Her son, with his unique sensitivity, had identified exactly the most delicate point of the situation. "Why do you think he would be sad?" "Because he always takes care of us," Michael responded simply. "And now Daddy takes care of us too. It's a lot of care, isn't it?" Catherine couldn't help but smile at the childish logic. "Sometimes, Michael, adults need to make difficult decisions, but that doesn't mean someone will stop taking care of you. Like when I have to choose between chocolate and strawberry ice cream?" "Sort of," she laughed, "but a little more complicated." The next day, Catherine arrived earlier at the publisher, determined to have an important conversation. She found Edward in his office, organizing the final details of a children's book launch. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. Edward looked at her, and his usual smile had a touch of sadness. "About Richard's proposal. How did you—" "I've known you for 2 years, Catherine. I know when something important is happening." He set the papers aside. "And I also know you're going to accept." "I haven't decided yet," she protested. "But—" her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "Yes, you have. It's in your eyes, in the way you've been researching the corporate market, in the way your eyes shine when you talk about the changes you could implement." Edward stood up, approaching her. "And you know what? You should accept." "Edward, Catherine, you're amazing with children's books, but I always knew you had potential for much more. You managed your life, raised Michael alone, built a career. Now you have the chance to do something even bigger. But what about you? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Me? Edward smiled, that gentle smile that always warmed her heart. I remain your friend, Michael's Uncle Edward. Some people enter our lives to help us get where we need to be, even if they don't stay forever. Catherine felt tears forming in her eyes. I don't know if I deserve so much support. You deserve this and much more. Edward took her hands in his. Now go. Change that company. Show them how to manage with heart. And don't worry about me. I'll always be around for ice cream days with Michael. That afternoon, Catherine entered the imposing building of Mitchell Enterprises. The security guard recognized her from the news and smiled, indicating the elevator. On the 47th floor, Melissa received her with a knowing smile. Richard was in his office. The blinds opened this time, showing a spectacular view of the city. At his side, a small desk had been installed, where Michael was drawing intently. So, she said, making them both look in her direction, when can I start? Michael jumped from his chair, running to hug her. Richard remained in his place, but his smile said everything. First, Catherine continued, taking the golden button from her pocket, I need to establish some rules. I'm not the young executive you met anymore. Now I'm a mother, a professional, and above all, I know exactly what I want. And what do you want? Richard asked. To make a difference. To create an environment where no family has to choose between career and love. And she looked at Michael, who was watching the scene with bright eyes. To teach our son that sometimes the best stories are the ones we rewrite together. Does this mean you're also a mini CEO now? Michael asked, making the adults laugh. No, son, Catherine replied, ruffling his hair. It means we're a family now. A different family with different stories, but still a family. Catherine's first month at Mitchell Enterprises was a quiet revolution. Her office, strategically located between HR and the presidency, became a safe haven for employees who had never felt comfortable expressing their needs. The walls, once austere, now displayed Michael's colorful drawings and photos of employees' families. Ms. Mitchell, her assistant Paula, entered the room with a stack of reports. The numbers from the Quality of Life program are in. The adoption was higher than expected. Catherine, she gently corrected. You can call me Catherine. Taking the reports, her eyes lit up seeing the results. The new corporate daycare had a waiting list. The flexible schedule program had reduced absenteeism by 40%, and productivity had increased. Across the hall, through the glass walls, she could see Richard in his office. He was different, his tie often loose, sleeves rolled up, always ready to bend down and listen to a child visiting their father or mother at work. The mini CEO had transformed not only the father, but the entire culture of the company. Mommy! Michael came running into her office, still in his school uniform. Look what I made in art class. It was a colorful painting representing 3 people. A woman with brown hair, her, a man in a suit, Richard, and a small figure in the middle, smiling, himself. At the top, in crooked letters, was written, My Family Inc. It's beautiful. My love. Catherine smiled, hanging the drawing on her bulletin board. But where's Uncle Edward? Oh, he's here. Michael pointed to a corner of the drawing where there was a smiling figure. He's the artistic director of the family. Catherine felt her heart tighten. Edward had kept his promise, remaining present in their lives even after her departure from the publisher. Every Thursday was still ice cream day with Michael, a tradition that now included stories about the mini CEO's adventures. Ms. Catherine, Paula interrupted timidly. The employee committee is waiting in the meeting room. Can I come too? Michael asked, already adjusting his bow tie, which he now wore whenever he visited the company. Of course you can, junior executive assistant, Catherine winked. In fact, I need your expert opinion on something very important. In the meeting room, the employee representatives melted at seeing Michael occupy a chair next to his mother, taking out his notepad, a gift from Richard, and a glitter pen. Well, as everyone knows, Catherine began, we are implementing several changes in the company, and today I want to present a new project, Family Inc., Building Bridges. As she explained the program, which included special days for children to learn about their parents' work, workshops on balance between personal and professional life, and a family mentoring system, Michael made his own records. His reports, full of drawings and peculiar observations, had become an unexpected source of insights. "And what does our junior executive assistant think of the proposal?" one of the representatives asked, getting into the spirit of the meeting. Michael stood up on his chair, adjusting his tie as he had learned from his father. "I think it needs more colors and ice cream. Meetings with ice cream are always better." The laughter that followed broke any remaining tension. Catherine observed with pride her son, who had transformed his innocent job interview into a movement that was changing the lives of hundreds of families. After the meeting, as they walked down the hall, Michael suddenly stopped. "Mummy, are you happy here?" Catherine crouched down to be at her son's height. "Why that question?" "Because you smile more now, just like when we have ice cream." She hugged her son, inhaling the scent of crayons and chocolate that always accompanied him. "Yes, Michael, I'm very happy, and do you know why?" "Why?" "Because sometimes the best deals in life aren't made with contracts, but with golden buttons and pinky promises." Michael smiled, revealing the new gap in his teeth. His baby tooth had fallen out during a board meeting, causing more commotion than a stock market crash. "And with lots of chocolate ice cream." "And with lots of chocolate ice cream," she agreed, standing up and taking his hand. "Shall we go now? Your father must be waiting for our family meeting." "Excuse me, Catherine," Paula appeared. Again. "More applications have arrived for the junior internship program." "More kids wanting to be mini CEOs?" Michael asked, excited. "Actually," Paula smiled, "their parents wanting to learn from them." The conference room on the 47th floor was different that afternoon. In place of the traditional executive chairs, there were colorful cushions scattered on the floor. The glass walls were decorated with children's drawings, and a side table offered cookies and juice boxes. It was the first Family Ink Day, and Mitchell Enterprises had never seen anything like it. Richard adjusted the projector, while children of various ages ran around the space, all wearing mini badges of junior executives, an idea of Michael's that had become all the rage in the company. Catherine organized the presentation materials, smiling as she watched her son solemnly explaining to a group of children the importance of keeping bow ties aligned. "Attention, everyone!" Michael clapped his hands, imitating the gesture he had learned from his mother. "The family meeting is about to begin." The parents, seated on cushions along with their children, laughed at the little host's seriousness. Michael had become a sort of mascot for the company, his natural charisma infecting even the most serious executives. "Today," Richard began, winking at his son, "we're going to learn some very important lessons about business. And our teachers—" He made a dramatic pause. "Are you children?" A girl of approximately 6 raised her hand. "I can teach how to braid hair. My mom never manages to do it right before meetings." "I know how to make a paper airplane that really flies," an older boy offered. "And I can teach the secret lemonade recipe," Michael completed, proud. Catherine took the floor, her smile lighting up the room. "You know, when Michael first appeared here, we thought he was just a child wanting to play executive, but he taught us the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes we need to see the world through a child's eyes to understand what really matters." The lights softly dimmed, and a video began to play on the screen. It was a compilation of moments from the last few months. Michael in his first interview, employees playing with their children in the new kids space, meetings where executives exchanged their ties for aprons to participate in cooking workshops with the children. "Family Inc. is not just a corporate program," Richard continued. "It's a new way of thinking about work and family, and it all started with a boy who just wanted to help his mother rest more." Michael, seated between his parents, tightly held his 2 golden buttons, one a gift from his father, the other from his mother. His eyes shone with pride as he saw his story inspiring other families. "And now," Catherine announced, "we're going to do something different. Each child will spend time in their parents' room, but not to work, to teach something special." The room exploded with excitement. Children ran to their parents, already planning activities. A finance executive was learning to make bead bracelets with her daughter. The marketing director was receiving an intensive Minecraft lesson from his teenage son. In a corner of the room, Edward, who had been specially invited to the event, was teaching some children to play guitar. His gaze met Catherine's for a moment, and they exchanged a smile of mutual understanding. Some people really enter our lives to help us find the right path. "Dad," Michael tugged at Richard's suit sleeve, "can I teach you how to do a pinky promise the right way? You still do it a bit crooked." Richard laughed, bending down to be at his son's height. "Of course you can. And afterward, can you teach me more about those green and red arrows? I think I still have a lot to learn. And I can teach you both how to make a chocolate milkshake," Catherine joined them, "because some family meetings need dessert." As the afternoon progressed, the conference room at Mitchell Enterprises remained full of laughter, colors, and unexpected lessons. On the whiteboard, where previously there were only graphs and projections, now was written in childish handwriting, "Rules of Family Inc." Always smile. Hug a lot. Apologize when you make a mistake. Keep promises, especially pinky ones. Have ice. Cream together. Remember that love has no tax ID. And below a PS in adult handwriting, and never ever underestimate the power of a child with a bow tie and a dream. The success of the Family Incommerce program had transformed Mitchell Enterprises into an international case study. Journalists from around the world wanted to interview the mini CEO and his family, fascinated by the story of the little boy who had revolutionized one of the country's largest companies. On a Thursday morning, as Catherine reviewed some documents in her office, Richard entered with a worried expression on his face. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind him. "I received a proposal to expand the company internationally. They want to open a branch in London." Catherine felt her heart race. And they want me to personally supervise the operation, for 6 months initially." The silence that followed was heavy. 6 months, half a year away from Michael, after finally having built such a special relationship. "Have you decided anything?" Catherine asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I can't make this decision alone," Richard replied, sitting down. "Not anymore. We're a family now." Before they could continue the conversation, Michael came running into the room, waving a colorful paper. "Mommy, Daddy, look! I was chosen to represent the class at the science fair." His smile was radiant. "I'm going to present a project about how to make people happier at work, just like you do." The parents exchanged significant looks. How to tell a 5-year-old boy that his father would need to spend months on the other side of the world. "That's wonderful, son," Catherine forced a smile. "When is the fair?" "In 5 months," Michael responded excitedly. "And I want both of you to help me prepare everything. It's going to be the best project of all." Richard swallowed hard. The fair would be exactly during his period in London. "Michael," he carefully began, "we need to talk about something important." The boy immediately noticed the change in his father's tone of voice. His happy expression faltered a little. "Is it about work?" he asked, his voice small. "You have that face you get when there's a difficult meeting." Richard picked up his son, sitting him on his desk. "Yes, it's about work, but it's different this time. We need to make a decision as a family." As Richard explained about London, Catherine observed Michael's expressions change. First surprise, then confusion, and finally, what hurt the most, that look of forced understanding that no 5-year-old child should have. "But you'll miss my science fair," Michael stated, playing with the golden button in his pocket. "No, son, that's why I need your help to decide what to do." Michael was silent for a moment, his little face furrowed in concentration. Then, to the surprise of his parents, he got down from the desk and went to his backpack, taking out his junior executive notepad. "I think we need an emergency meeting," he declared, adjusting his bow tie, "with ice cream rights." Catherine couldn't help but smile. Her son was using the same tactics he had learned from them to deal with difficult situations. At the family's favorite ice cream parlor, Michael organized his meeting with all the seriousness he could muster. "First," he began, licking his chocolate ice cream, "how long does a video call last?" As long as we need, Richard replied, intrigued. And is there internet in London? Yes, there is. Then, Michael continued, making notes with his glitter pen, we can do like when Uncle Edward traveled to Seattle. He told me stories by video every night, remember, Mummy? Catherine nodded, beginning to understand where her son was going. And about the science fair? Michael hesitated. Can I do my project on how to keep a family together even when they're far apart? Because then you can participate even being in London, Dad. Richard felt his eyes well up. His son wasn't just accepting his absence, he was finding ways to transform it into something positive. Besides, Michael continued, now with a mischievous smile, you'll have to bring me a really cool present from there, and it can't be a bow tie because I already have many. The tension that hung over the family began to dissipate. In place of the fear of separation, a new plan was beginning to be born, one that involved daily video calls, shared projects, and of course, lots of chocolate ice cream. The news of Richard's departure for London spread quickly through the company. What surprised everyone wasn't the international expansion, but the way the family was handling the situation. Michael had transformed the challenge into a special project, which he called Family Inc. International Division. In his room, now decorated with a world map where London was marked with a golden star, Michael conducted his own research about the city. Edward, who continued to be a constant presence in his life, helped him learn some British expressions. How are you? Michael practiced, seated at his mini-desk next to Catherine's desk. I am fine, thank you, Edward responded, smiling as he helped the boy with his pronunciation. Catherine observed the scene with a mixture of gratitude and tenderness. It was amazing how Edward kept his promise to always be present, even after all the changes. Mummy, Michael called, interrupting her thoughts. Can I make a suggestion for the company? Of course, my love. What is it? We could make a Family Inc. newspaper. That way, when Daddy's in London, he can know all the news from here and we can know the news from there. The idea was brilliant in its simplicity. Soon, the mini CEO journal was being born, with Michael as editor-in-chief and a team of junior reporters, children of other employees who loved participating in the project. Richard, who was in Einstein, the final preparations for his trip, was delighted with the initiative. In his last week in the United States, he helped Michael prepare the first edition. Look, Dad, Michael proudly showed, here there will be a section just for your adventures in London. And you need to send photos, okay? Especially if you see Big Ben. Richard laughed, but his eyes were misty. I'll send all the photos I can, and you know what? I'm going to take a bow tie just like yours to wear at important meetings there. Promise? Pinky swear. Richard extended his pinky finger, and with the golden button. On the eve of the trip, the family organized a special meeting at the company. The conference room was decorated with flags of the United States and the United Kingdom, and there was a giant cake in the shape of an airplane. Attention, everyone! Michael climbed onto a chair, his bow tie perfectly aligned. Today is a very important day for Family Inc. Our CEO, my dad, is going to London to do important business. But before we need to establish some rules. With Edward's help, he unrolled a colorful poster where it was written, Rules of Family Inc. as International. Video call every day, even if it's just to say goodnight. Photos of everything, especially if you see landmarks. Tell all the news for the mini CEO journal. Wear a bow tie at important meetings. Never forget that love doesn't need a passport. Catherine, who was standing next to Richard, discreetly held his hand. Their eyes met, full of memories of the past and hopes for the future. And there's one more thing, Michael continued, now with a more serious tone. Daddy, do you promise you won't find another junior executive assistant in London? The entire room laughed, but the question had a touch of true childish concern. Richard approached his son, adjusting his bow tie. Michael, do you know why I wear this golden button? He showed his, identical to his son's. Because it reminds me that some positions are unique and irreplaceable. And the junior executive assistant position is already filled by the best professional in the world. Michael hugged his father tightly, whispering in his ear, And I promise to take care of Mommy and the company while you're away. You can count on it. Edward, who was filming everything for the first episode of the mini CEO Journal, captured the exact moment when father and son sealed their promise with a touch of bow ties, a ritual they had created together. The challenge of distance was just beginning, but Family Inc. had learned that some bonds are too strong to be measured in miles. After all, as Michael liked to say, love doesn't need GPS to find its way home. The first month without Richard was a test of adaptation for everyone. Michael transformed his corner in his mother's office into an international communications center, with a calendar where he marked the days until his father's return and a photo board that grew with each video call. "Daddy, you won't believe," Michael exclaimed during one of the nightly video calls. The mini CEO Journal won an award. On the laptop screen, Richard appeared wearing his promised bow tie, even though it was already late at night in London. "Really? What award, son?" "The Journalists Association gave us a certificate. They said it's the most innovative corporate journal of the year." Michael proudly showed the framed certificate. "And the best part, they're going to do a story about us." Catherine, who was watching the scene with a smile, noticed how Richard seemed tired, even trying to maintain enthusiasm for his son. The deep circles under his eyes and the wrinkled suit jacket betrayed the long hours of work. "Michael, how about showing Daddy the surprise we prepared?" she suggested, trying to cheer up both. "Oh yes." The boy ran out and came back with his guitar. "Dad, I learned a new song. Uncle Edward taught me especially to play for you." The first notes of London Bridge filled the room, played with Michael's characteristic dedication. A few mistakes here and there, but the emotion compensated for any out-of-tune note. Richard struggled to contain the tears on the other side of the screen. "Son, that was amazing." "And there's more," Michael continued excitedly. "I'm organizing a special presentation for when you come back. It's going to be like a Family Inc. show." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, until Michael began to yawn. Catherine convinced him to get ready for bed, promising that he could send one last message to his father before lying down. When they were alone on the video call, Catherine noticed Richard's fatigue even more. "How is it really going?" she asked softly. Richard sighed, loosening his bow tie. "Difficult. The negotiations are complex, the cultural difference is greater than we expected, and..." He hesitated. "I miss you both so much that sometimes it hurts physically." "Michael misses you too. The other day I found him sleeping with the suit you gave him, the one from the first interview." A silence loaded with longing filled the call. "Catherine," Richard began hesitantly, "I'm thinking of refusing the project extension." "What do you mean?" "They want me to stay 3 more months beyond what was planned. They offered a considerable bonus, but..." He shook his head. "I can't miss more moments. Not again." Catherine felt her heart tighten. Was this the same Richard who years ago had chosen an important merger over their engagement dinner? "Are you sure? It's an important opportunity for the company." The company survived 5 years without knowing Michael. "I don't want him to survive 5 more months without really knowing me." At that moment, Michael returned to the room, already in his pajamas, carrying something in his hands. "Dad, before I sleep, I wanted to show you something." He held up a paper to the camera. It was a drawing of himself wearing a suit in front of a tall building. "It's you in London. I drew it for tomorrow's journal. The headline will be, 'CEO of Family Inc. has international success wearing bow tie.'" Richard laughed, but his eyes were misty. "It looks incredible, son. But you know what? I think our next headline is going to be even better." "Which one?" "CEO returns home early. Family is the best business in the world." Michael's eyes widened. "Really? You're coming back sooner?" "Yes, because I learned that some contracts are more important than others, especially those signed with golden buttons and pinky promises." Michael jumped for joy, hugging Catherine. "Mummy, we need to prepare the biggest welcome party that Family Inc. has ever seen." "With ice cream?" she asked, smiling. "With lots of ice cream," Michael confirmed, to then add thoughtfully, "and maybe some new bow ties. Daddy seems to be wearing the same one every day." Richard's laughter echoed through the screen, lighter and truer than it had sounded in weeks. On the other side of the ocean, in his office in London, He touched the golden button on his suit, feeling for the first time since he arrived, truly successful. The news of Richard's early return caused a real revolution at Mitchell Enterprises. Michael, self-appointed welcome party coordinator, transformed his small desk into an event command center. "Paula," he called Catherine's assistant with all seriousness, "can you write down the list of important things?" He cleared his throat, adjusting his bow tie. "First, we need balloons, lots of balloons. Second, chocolate ice cream for everyone. Third, a really big banner saying, 'Welcome back to the best CEO in the world,' after the mini-CEO, of course." Catherine observed the scene with a smile as her son mobilized the entire company for the celebration. The transformation that child had caused in their lives was almost surreal. "We need special help," Michael declared during one of his planning meetings. "Mommy, can we call Uncle Edward? He always has the best ideas for parties." Catherine hesitated for a moment, but agreed. Edward had proven to be not only a loyal friend, but a fundamental part of the emotional support Michael needed during his father's absence. Edward arrived the next day carrying his guitar and a folder full of ideas. "So, boss," he joked with Michael, "what's the plan?" "I want to do a special presentation," Michael explained, excited. "All the songs I learned while Daddy was away, and also," he lowered his voice as if sharing a state secret, "I want to play that song you taught me, the one about family." While Michael and Edward rehearsed, Catherine finalized the last details of the report she would present to Richard. The numbers were impressive. The Family Income program had not only improved the work environment, but also increased productivity and reduced employee turnover by 70%. "Catherine," Edward called her after Michael left for his English class, "he's getting better and better at guitar. Thanks to you," she smiled. "Edward, we never properly thanked you for everything you did, for everything you still do. No need to thank me. Some people enter our lives to be part of the story, others to help write it. I'm happy to be a co-author of this chapter." The day of Richard's return approached, and Michael was increasingly anxious. Every night during video calls, he had to control himself not to reveal the details of the surprise he was preparing. "Dad, will you wear a bow tie when you arrive, right?" he asked during one of the calls. "Of course. I've already set aside the most beautiful one I have." "And did you bring presents?" Richard laughed. "Yes, including one that I think will be perfect for our next project together." On the eve of the return, Michael couldn't sleep. Catherine found him in his room, organizing his bow ties by color. "Son, is everything okay?" "Mommy," he hesitated, dropping the ties. "What if Daddy doesn't like the surprise?" Catherine sat next to her son, pulling him into a hug. "Michael, do you know what the most precious gift you've ever given your father is?" "The golden button?" "No. It was showing him that real success isn't measured by numbers on a spreadsheet, but by smiles on the face of the ones we love." Michael thought for a moment. "Like when he chose to come back early for us." "Exactly." "Mommy," Michael whispered, already drowsy, "I think Family Inc. is the best business we've ever done, isn't it?" Catherine kissed her son's forehead, tucking him in bed. "Yes, my love, and do you know why? Because the initial capital was love, the investment was time, and the dividends are happiness." As Michael finally fell asleep, hugging the miniature suit he would wear the next day, Catherine received one last message from Richard. "Already at the airport. Can't wait to come home. To our home." In his room, Michael dreamed of a company where all the rooms had ice cream, machines, all the meetings ended with hugs, and all contracts were signed with pinky promises and golden buttons. And in his dream, that company already existed. It was Family Inc., where love was the most valuable currency in the market. The airport lobby was unrecognizable that morning. Colorful balloons floated everywhere, and a huge banner with golden letters announced, "Welcome back to the best CEO in the world, after the mini-CEO." Mitchell Enterprises employees, all wearing bow ties in honor of Michael, formed a guard of honor. Michael, wearing his most elegant suit and his most special bow tie, couldn't stay still. Every minute he checked the small guitar he had brought and adjusted the sign he was holding, where he had drawn his complete family. "What time is it, Mummy?" he asked for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Catherine, elegant in a blue dress, checked her watch. 10 minutes until the flight arrives, love." The wait seemed endless. Edward, who was helping coordinate the children's choir, all children of employees, made the final adjustments to the group's positioning. Each child held a letter, which together formed Family Inc. Success is being together. Suddenly, the flight board announced, "Flight 247 from London, landed." Michael's heart raced. He tightly gripped the golden button in his pocket, a habit he had developed when he was nervous. Catherine held his hand, feeling the same anxiety. The first passengers began to exit through the arrival gate. Michael stood on his tiptoes at every movement, and then... "Dad!" Michael's shout echoed through the lobby when he spotted Richard. Richard, wearing a bow tie identical to his son's, barely had time to drop his bags before Michael threw himself into his arms. The hug that followed was worth more than all the contracts he had ever signed in his life. "You're wearing the bow tie," Michael noticed, emotional. "A promise is a promise, son." Richard smiled, his eyes misty. When they finally separated from the hug, Richard saw Catherine. Their gazes met, loaded with memories and new meanings. She approached, and the three embraced, forming the most beautiful logo Family Inc. ever had. "Dad, Dad!" Michael pulled at Richard's suit sleeve. "We have a surprise!" At his signal, the children's choir positioned themselves. Edward picked up his guitar, and Michael placed himself at the front of the group, holding his own instrument. The first notes of Home filled the airport. Michael, with his childish and sincere voice, began to sing, mixing the original lyrics with a unique version he had created especially for that moment. "Hold on to me as we go." Family united. As we roll down this unfamiliar road, love without measure, and although this wave is stringing us along, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home. Passengers stopped to watch, many filming the scene with their cell phones. Some cried discreetly, touched by the purity of the moment. When the song ended, Richard was in tears. Michael, that was. "Wait, there's more!" Michael ran to his backpack and took out a folder. "I prepared a special report for you." The report was a handmade album full of photos, drawings, and clippings from the mini CEO journal. Each page told a story from the months Richard was away, but with a special touch that only Michael could give. "See, Dad, here's the happiness growth chart for the company." He pointed to a colorful drawing where several smiling faces climbed up a staircase. "And here's the index of hugs per meeting. It increased 200%. Richard flipped through the album carefully, as if holding the most precious of documents. In a sense, it was exactly that. "And there's one last thing," Michael said, his voice becoming serious. He took from his pocket a small object that shone, another golden button. "It's for you to keep with the other one. That way you'll never forget that you have two important promises, to be my dad and to be a nice boss." Catherine, who was observing the scene, realized that some promises don't need words. Sometimes they come in the form of golden buttons, bow ties, and 5-year-old smiles. Edward began to play softly in the background, while employees approached to welcome their CEO. But at that moment, Richard wasn't the powerful executive of Mitchell Enterprises. He was just a father hugging his son, feeling the weight of 2 golden buttons in his pocket, a weight that was worth more than all the gold in the world. 6 months had passed since Richard's return. Mitchell Enterprises had completely transformed. The Family Inc. program was now a world reference in corporate culture, and companies from around the world sent representatives to learn from the mini CEO. On a special afternoon, Michael was in his office, now officially designated as Junior, Innovation Directorate, preparing for his most important presentation. "Are you nervous?" Catherine asked, helping him adjust his bow tie. "A little bit," he admitted, "but Daddy said it's normal to be nervous when we care a lot about something." The conference room was packed. Executives, employees, journalists, and even a UN representative had come for the official launch of the Family Inc. Manual, How to Transform Companies into Families, a book that gathered all the experience of the past year. Richard, seated in the front row, smiled proudly. At his side, Edward, now director of the newly created Department of Culture and Well-being, held his guitar, ready for the special presentation they had prepared. Michael climbed onto the small improvised stage, cleared his throat and began, "Good afternoon, I'm Michael, but you might know me as Mini CEO. Today I'm going to tell a story that began with a very special job interview." For 40 minutes, he enchanted the audience by retelling his journey. The eyes of those present filled with tears and smiles alternately, especially when he reached the most important part. "And do you know what the secret of Family Inc.'s success is?" He made a dramatic pause. "It's not the numbers, nor the contracts, not even the bow ties, although they help a lot. The secret is that here everyone has a golden button in their heart." Catherine and Richard exchanged emotional looks. Their son had become not only an extraordinary child, but a symbol of change and hope. "To conclude," Michael continued, "we prepared something special. Uncle Edward, can you help me?" Edward climbed onto the stage with his guitar, and together they began to play an original song composed especially for the occasion. In Family Inc., love is capital. Each smile is worth gold. Each hug is fundamental. You don't need a tie to be a good professional. You just need to understand that family is essential. At the end of the presentation, Michael had one last surprise. "And now, I want to present the most important document in the history of Family Inc." With Catherine's help, he unrolled a large, colorful parchment. Universal Contract of Family Inc. Clause 1. Love is the best investment. Clause 2. Smiles are the best currency. Clause 3. Pinky promises are legally binding. Clause 4. Ice cream. Solves 99% of problems. Clause 5. Everyone has the right to a golden button in their heart. Signed, Michael, Mini CEO. Richard, Dad CEO. Catherine, Mom CEO. And everyone who believes that family and work can go hand in hand. The entire audience stood up in applause. Journalists rushed to record every detail of that historic moment, but for Michael, the best part was seeing his parents approach to sign the contract, followed by Edward, and then by each person present in the auditorium. "Son," Richard whispered as he signed, "you transform not just our company but our lives." "It wasn't just me, Dad," Michael wisely replied. "It was love. It's like those green arrows you like so much. It only goes up." Catherine hugged. Them both feeling that moment was the perfect conclusion to a story that began with a brave boy, a crooked bow tie, and a dream of helping his mother rest more. And so Family Inc. established its most important legacy, proving that the best businesses in life are those made with the heart, that the most valuable contracts are written with love, and that sometimes it takes a 5-year-old child to teach adults the most precious lessons about success and happiness.